Chapter 4. Margaret was the executive vice president for West Coast operations, and Alan managed one of her statewide marketing teams. One Friday afternoon, Margaret called Alan into her office to promote him to director of West Coast marketing. Alan was thrilled. He had suspected for some time that the position would be his in the future, but the future came sooner than he had imagined. The two discussed the region's business opportunities for an hour or so, and Margaret gave Alan a copy of the promotion announcement that was going out that afternoon. They shook hands and wished each other a good weekend. The two met again at 8:40 the following Monday morning, moving aside for each other as they passed in opposite directions through the front door. Margaret was leaving for a meeting downtown, and Alan was arriving to start his first week as director. Still buoyant about his good fortune, Alan greeted Margaret with a hearty good morning. Margaret responded with a firm, "Work starts at 8 o'clock. Alan, caught off guard by her terseness, spurted, "Oh, I was in Sacramento this weekend and woke up at 5 o'clock to get here on time, but traffic was heavier than I anticipated." Margaret wasn't listening as she briskly walked on. Alan headed for his office, unsettled. I know the exchange seared both parties because they talked about it with me several times over the years when I consulted to their organization. From Alan's vantage point, here it was my first day as director, and she pings me before I'm even in the building. I knew she was a stickler for punctuality, and I let her down. I felt like crap. Margaret didn't fare much better in the aftermath. If I had one concern about promoting Alan, it was that he would live too large as a director. I knew I'd have to watch his expense reports and adherence to company protocol. I'd have to call him quickly on extravagances. Little did I know I'd be required on his first day, literally as he was taking his first steps into the new job. I felt like crap. To me, this episode is poetry. It underscores that moments of discomfort are unavoidable in a healthy relationship between committed professionals. In fact, healthy relationships remain healthy because leaders don't shy away from these episodes. They use them to assure that their expectations and observations are unambiguous. Any immediate anxiety is offset by the longer-term value of forthrightness. Good managers confront issues when they're small, speak the words that must be spoken despite the unavoidable sting, and recognize that jangled nerves will repair themselves over time if the exchange is intended to help, not humiliate an individual. Now, just imagine what would have happened had Margaret not expressed her displeasure. Alan would have gone through the day oblivious that his late arrival had disturbed his boss. Or maybe he would have concluded that seniority has its privileges, confirmed in part by his boss's silence about his transgression. Margaret would have gotten into her car in a slow burn. That guy has nerve. I promote him on Friday and he cuts up on Monday. She might have begun to second-guess her decision, maybe even consider if the promotion could be withdrawn. Or maybe use the drive downtown to concoct any number of indirect ways to convey her displeasure. Later that day, she might edgily say something out of context to Alan, just to discharge her pent-up irritation. Alan would flinch at the jab without grasping the meaning or motive, and knowing Margaret, she would feel guilty about her awkward, unwarranted retaliation. But this is a success story. Margaret did express her displeasure. She spoke directly. She addressed the infraction immediately, headed it off before her frustration mounted. Both parties were uncomfortable, but both weathered the turbulence. Margaret came to realize that in that moment she was establishing an organizational precedent, a precedent of sufficient importance to counterbalance the ruffled feathers. She was seasoned enough to know that upbeat, affirming conversations with her employees are necessary to make a relationship successful, but not sufficient unto themselves. Alan came to realize that he was now working for a professional who would say what she meant and mean what she said, a lesson that had a profound effect on their relationship and on the way Alan would mature as a manager. The two worked successfully with each other for years to come. Margaret spoke the words that needed to be spoken in that fateful, fugitive moment.
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it, at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.